Welcome to the Bettendorf Public Library's Take Home Workshop. This time around, we're going to be making these lovely bracelets out of paper beads that we make ourselves. This is a great craft because you can make the beads have any look that you're interested in, and I'll show you some examples of that a little bit later, but let's jump in and see what's in our kit. In your kit, you're going to find a half of a styrofoam ball. You're going to find skewers, which we will cut into smaller sections. You're going to find our paper, and we're making our beads today out of photocopied sheet music. You're going to have cord, a little bit of string in your account. This is about 2 yards of a size 10 crochet thread. You're going to have a glue stick. You're going to have a bottle of clear nail polish. And if you don't want to use the nail polish, that's fine. We're using this to seal the beads and to give them a bit of a shine, and any sort of lacquer or poly that you might have that you prefer to work would work for that. And we're going to have one lone button that will serve as the clasp to our bracelet. What we're asking you to supply is a scissors or a straight edge. We'll have to cut our paper into sheets, or into strips, so whichever works better for you. A little bit of tape and a ruler. So with all of that stuff, let's get started on our bracelet. Our first step is to cut our paper into sheets. For beads this size, these are 3/4 of an inch, and I really like this size, so I'm going to stick with it. You can make larger or smaller, and you can use scissors to cut your paper, or I like to use a cutting mat and a straight edge. And we're going to just cut it into 3/4 length strips. I'm not just going to cut 3/4 all the way down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my cuts in such a way that there's not much white space in my beads. So I'm going to take some of these white strips and I'm going to get rid of those. And then I'm going to measure 3/4 from that point. Right about there. And so when we roll this up, you'll see that the music staff will be right in the center of the bead. And that's what I want. I want people be able to look at this and know that it is music. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to keep cutting these until I have enough for about 30 beads. Now, how many beads you do obviously depends on how big you want your bracelet to be and how loose you want it to be. This one I think is actually 30, and it's a little, just a touch more snug than I would like. So I'm going to do probably 32, maybe 2 more beads than what I have here. Maybe just 1, because it's a little bit snug, but not too much. So we're gonna cut that many strips and then we'll get to rolling. I've cut my paper into the 3/4 inch strips, and I went back and I actually counted the number of beads on this bracelet, and this was 23 beads. So I cut 25 strips so I can make it just a little bit bigger. Our next step is we're gonna take our skewers and we're just going to cut them into smaller sections. And if you have a wire cutter, that works well for this, but a scissors works too. And if your scissors doesn't quite make it through, then you can kind of start it and then break it. And if you have, some filaments hanging off, you might want to trim those off. What we're going to be using the skewers for is to give us a consistent diameter on our bead. We're going to roll the beads around the skewers, and then we're going to use them for drying too. So we need to do that with all of our skewers. Now that I have all of my skewers cut, I'm going to start rolling my paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is put down just a piece of scratch paper, because I'm going to be working with glue and I don't want to get that on my cutting surface. I'm going to take one of my strips of paper and put a little bit of glue on the end on the printed side, just a touch. Then I'm going to take a skewer and I'm going to wrap this around the skewer, and you want it to be wrapped on there straight because you don't want your paper to be spiraling off to either side. So as much as possible, we'll get it straight. And then we're just gonna wrap it up. And I'm gonna stop every once in a while and give it a little nudge on either side to make sure that I'm rolling as straight as I can. When I get close, almost to the end, then I'm gonna slide that skewer out and I'm going to squeeze it down on either side. Then I'm going to apply a little bit of glue here on the tail again, this time on the inside, and wrap that around and give it a good roll. And there you have one of your paper beads. Once you have your beads rolled, then we're going to use our clear nail polish to lacquer them. It'll seal them, it'll give them a little bit of a shine. So we're gonna put it back on our skewer and you see how it slides all the way down. We don't want that now. We want it to kind of stick out over the edge because if we lacquer it here, it's gonna stick to our skewer and we don't want that. So that's where our tape comes in. I'm gonna use just a little bit of tape. I'm gonna wrap it around the top of the skewer, maybe a ½ inch. And then when you put your bead on, it hits that tape and it won't slide all the way down. Once you've done that, then you can just go ahead and use the nail polish and paint it on there. Now, the nail polish will soak into this paper. It's a kind of a porous paper and it will soak in. So once you're done with this, you're going to end up with I would say more of a satiny finish. It's not going to be a very, very glossy finish. You also don't want to brush too hard. Make sure your brush is really loaded with polish because you don't want to brush too hard because it will smudge the printing. Now that might work differently if you have different paper that's less porous, like a photography paper or something like that. But for our paper, that's how we need to do it. Then I'm also going to go around the edge a little bit here. Then I'm going to take that skewer, I'm going to stick it into my styrofoam ball, and that's how we're going to do. This is going to be our drying rack. So we're going to let that sit. I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest of them and do that. Then we're going to come back and we're going to flip them over and do a second coat on that. I've rolled my roughly 25 beads and I've lacquered them all. I've done one coat and they've been sitting for about 15 minutes. So they're dry. Now I'm going to slide it off there, flip it around and do this again. I'm going to give it another coat on the outside and I'm going to coat the other end so that both ends will get a coat. And that was going to help hold your bead together, make sure it doesn't unravel. And again, give it a nice little shine. So we're going to do that again with all 25 beads and let them sit here in our little hedgehog until they dry. With our beads dry, we are ready to start stringing our bracelet. So we're going to take our cord, and just a note, if you want to use a needle and thread to thread your bracelet, you obviously can. This cord will go through the holes on our bracelets pretty easily on its own. But I did just paint a little bit of nail polish on the ends of our cord to keep them from fraying, stiffen them up just a hair. I didn't even dip it in. I just brushed a little bit on there to make it a little bit easier to thread. So we're going to take our cord and we're going to fold it in half. And at this loop, at the looped end, we're going to tie a knot so that it will leave a loop that is just big enough for our button to pass through. So we're just going to tie a knot there. And I'm actually going to slide it around my button and then snug the knot up to the base of the button. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does need to be big enough for your button to slide through there. Once we have that done, we're going to separate the strands that come off the knot. Take one out to the left and one out to the right. When you first start working here, it is a little awkward because these strings are so long, but they'll shorten them. Then I'm going to take a piece of tape again, and I'm going to tape down my knot there. It just kind of, it's almost like giving you an extra hand. It'll hold it still while you're threading. So I'm going to grab one of my beads, and if your beads stick to your skewers a little bit from the nail polish, just give them a little twist, and that'll pop them right off of there. And I'm going to take and I'm going to bring my thread through from one side to the other. Then I'm going to bring the other thread through. Now I went from right to left. Now I'm going to take the other thread and go from left to right. So you're looping your threads right on through there. And then I'm just going to pull them tight. Now I have two threads coming out of, or one thread coming out of either end of the bead, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab another bead. I'm going to take my right hand thread, run it through from right to left. I'm going to take my left hand thread and run it through from left to right. And I'm going to pull those tight. And you just keep doing that. I'm going to keep going all the way down until it is the length I want. As we're threading these, we can talk about how you determine how many beads you're going to need. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can take a piece of string and wrap it around your wrist and adjust it to where you need it to be, and that will give you the length. Keep in mind as you're threading your beads, you're going to take into account the length of the loop, and you're going to take into account the added length of the bead at the end, which is between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch for that part. You could take a piece of tape and wrap that around your wrist, and when I do that, I wrap it with the sticky side out, and then wrap it around, stick it to itself, and then I just cut it, and that will give you a measurement too. So if you have a bracelet that you already own that is a length that you like, you can just measure that. So there's different ways that you can go around, that you can measure the length that you're going to need. And thinking about what kind of paper that you could use to make beads, a couple things for me popped to mind. One would be a marbled paper, which would make a very pretty, kind of a variegated bead that might end up even looking like a semi-precious stone. Another option would be to do it from a photo of some place that has meaning for you. So it could be, a sunset over your favorite beach or a landscape of your favorite city. And that can make beautiful beads. And then not only will you have the beautiful beads when you're done, but it will be a remembrance of a place that means something special to you or to the person that you're giving the bracelet to. We're down to the last bead in the bracelet. We've threaded that on, and now we're going to finish off. The first thing we want to do is just go ahead and tie a knot here. Just a regular knot. And if possible, we'd like to have it centered on the bead, but if it gets a little off center, that's not a problem. So that's going to keep your beads on there. Then we're going to take our button. We're going to take one of our cords from behind through the buttonhole. There we go. Then we're going to go back down again through one of the other buttonholes. Then we're going to take our other cord and do the same thing through the empty buttonholes. So we're going to bring it up from behind through the buttonhole and back down again through the last remaining empty buttonhole. We're going to pull those tight. Then again, on the back of the button, we're going to tie a knot. And I'm doing a double knot. There you go. We're almost done. Now, you have the thread, this little triangle of cord that you can see, right? Coming from the bead up to the back of the button. You want to take one of your tails, you're going to run it through that, and you're going to knot it off there. And I would do that once or twice. Go through there, bring it through. If you can grab it, there we go. And then we're just going to give that a little snip right up tight against the knot. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side with the other one. We're going to take it through that little triangle of thread between the bead and the button. I can get it through there. There we go. Tie a knot. And do it again. Then if you really, really want to secure it tight, again, you can take your nail polish and you can just do a little drop right on your knots there. Not a lot, just enough, and that'll kind of cement that in. Don't forget to trim that thread off right up next to your knot. And then your bracelet is ready to wear. So to put it on, you just run your button through the loop that you started with. And as you can see, this is the new one. It fits me a little bit looser. This one was 23 beads. This one was, I believe, 24. So it just makes it a little bit looser, and it all depends on what is comfortable with you. So there's your paper bead bracelet. We'd like to see your bracelets too. So share them with us on social media and join us again for our next take-home workshop.